things that was really important in our work is being a good listener. Okay? And it's not something I ever went to school for and got formally trained on. I'm guessing it's not something you got trained on and went to school to do either. Yet somehow we learned how to be a better listener. So for you, Liz, how do you show up as a good listener?
Well, listen, I think, listen. It's interesting because we do that all the time in conversation, right? We say, listen. And I think it's because that it's so essential when any of us is speaking that we feel that somebody truly is listening. We don't speak to hear ourselves talk. Well, some people do, but for the most part we don't. We speak to get a point across, to make an impact, to be heard. And I will be frank, most of us are terrible at this. Even those of us who are good at this are often terrible at this. I think it's much easier and more comfortable and more automatic to talk. And if we're not talking, we're listening, but we're planning what's the next thing we're going to say. So we're not fully present, we're not fully listening, we're just waiting for the right place to interject. Sometimes it's to agree, sometimes it's to say something totally different.
Absolutely. I'm reminded of the Stephen Covey piece on listening with the intent to understand versus listening with the intent to reply. What I hear you talking about is often we're listening with the intent to reply.
Absolutely, absolutely. And oftentimes we're listening with the intent to just let the other person shut up so we can have our turn to say what we came into the conversation intending to say. Some of the clients that I work with are, most of them are very successful. They're all successful, well-intended people who have lots of talent and lots of strengths. And sometimes the downfall is just how smart they are. Because they will go into a meeting, whether it's a one-on-one meeting or perhaps a group meeting or a presentation of some sort, kind of knowing a lot of the answers. They've thought things through, they've gotten to a place where they have a lot of value to contribute. The downside, though, is that it makes them impatient. It makes it awfully difficult for them to sit quietly and attentively, waiting for the opportunity to say what they know eventually has to be the outcome of the meeting anyway. The downside is that in doing that, a number of things. One, miss out on really useful information they can get from other people. They miss out on hearing other points of view and other perspectives that perhaps hadn't occurred to them. They miss out on hearing potential opposition that they need to find a way to work with, work around, deal with. They also oftentimes alienate people that are speaking with them. There's really almost nothing worse than feeling that you're being ignored, discounted, dismissed. It makes people feel really kind of disengaged, hurt, angry, and ultimately is a very ineffective way to be a leader within an organization.
That's a really good point. So when we think about listening, it's clearly key to being a successful leader. So for you, and in your work as an executive coach and in my work, we have to be a better listener.
Yes, for sure.
So how do you do it? How do you get yourself in a place to be a better listener? What are the techniques that you apply for yourself to be a more effective listener?
One of the things I have to do, and I think could probably benefit many people, is to remind yourself before sitting down with somebody to listen. I mean, it seems so straightforward, but to not go into it rehearsing the lines of what I'm about to say, or making sure I have, everything lined up so that the meeting goes well, quote unquote. But it's really about, okay, remember, the most important and impactful thing I can do is listen to the person that I'm sitting with. And it really, truly is. It really, for the reasons that I just outlined, getting more information, hearing other points of view, but maybe more important than anything else, it really is a wonderful and essential way to build trust.
Great.
Right?
Yeah, this is a really good point, is just the preparation. Quite often we go into a meeting and we prepare what we're going to say, and I hear you saying is prepare to listen, and remind yourself listening is an important part of planning and preparation.
Listening is perhaps the most important part.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now when you're in the meeting
Yes.
and you're listening, what specifically do you do with your body, with your ears, with your eyes to be an effective listener?
It's a good question. And so I'll tell you what I do, and I'll tell you a couple of the pitfalls that I see people sometimes falling into. What I do is when I'm speaking with somebody, and more importantly, when I'm listening to somebody, might sound self-explanatory, but I stop talking, right? Like you just close your mouth and stop talking. You make eye contact. Eye contact is so important, and one of those things that I find not everybody can do consistently well. Some people are either shy or a little awkward or busy looking down at their notes or whatever it may be. But eye contact is incredibly important for letting the other person know that you are listening to what they have to say. What you're doing now, Rick, as I'm speaking, you're kind of nodding your head a little bit, kind of acknowledging what I'm saying, indicating that you are taking in what I have to say. I think many of us do this fairly naturally, but many people do not. So that's another thing, that as you're speaking, even as you're talking sometimes, you might find that you're doing that. And that's a body language thing that lets people know that you're paying close attention. You might lean into the other person a little bit. So they're talking and you lean forward, whether you're leaning forward on a desk between you or you lean in towards them a little bit. You want to be respectful of their personal boundaries. You don't want to go over the line. But for people to see you lean in as they're speaking, even if you're on a conference call, you might find yourself leaning into the speaker in the middle of the table. That shows engagement, that shows interest, and it certainly shows that you're paying close attention.
Yes, those are really great points. One of the other things that triggered for me in terms of listening that I do personally is I listen to the words that people use.
Yes.
And then I play that back in the same way. Okay? So when I say you might even lean in, I say, okay, so Liz, I'm hearing you talk about leaning in and the importance of leaning in, and using the exact same language that Liz used versus a paraphrase or an interpretation of what I heard Liz say. And quite often for me, that helps me get head nods from the people that I'm speaking back to, reflecting back what they've said.
Absolutely. To show that you have taken in the precise words that someone has used is a tremendous validation that you have heard them. And if you're uncertain of what somebody has said, you can use a similar technique. Because so what I'm hearing you say is, and you do as close a job as you can, and then you can add the little piece at the end, do I have that right? Or did I miss anything? Or even, is there anything more that we should be talking about in this regard? So that you're giving people an invitation to continue the conversation, to validate that you do have it right, to maybe clarify if you don't have it quite right. These are all very useful tips to let people know that they've been heard and that you are truly listening to them.
Great. All right, so I have 3 yes or no questions for you, Liz, around listening. Okay? So the first question, before we start the questions, I want you to think of the best listener you know, besides yourself. Okay? The best listener you know on the planet.
Okay.
Okay? Do you have that person?
I do.
Okay. Do you like that person?
Very much. Oh, I'm sorry, yes. You said yes or no questions.
Do you trust that person?
Yes.
Do you respect that person?
Yes.
Okay. Right. So just by becoming a better listener, we build likability, we build trust, and we build respect. Okay?
Indeed.
Yet, it's not likely when you were growing up in school, you took a course on listening. Maybe you did later, but this is one of those things that is so important as a skill, yet we don't teach it in school. And so I really appreciate you sharing those techniques because, in my work and in your work, it's critical to be an effective coach, okay? And in the people that we serve, the clients, the leaders, it's important for them to be good listeners as well.
Yes.
So appreciate you listening in today. I hope you were listening and watching us today. I appreciate you taking the time out to be with us today, and I look forward to seeing you again in another video.